Sienna pressed her back against the cold hallway wall, the polished wood of the floor biting through the thin soles of her boots. Through the narrow crack of the dining room door, the muffled voices of her family reached her ears. Light, joking but sharp with cruelty. The kind of laughter that sinks deep, the kind that makes you feel like you don't belong anywhere. In her hands, the gift she had chosen with care, a simple wooden box lovingly wrapped, suddenly felt impossibly heavy, as though each lie and whispered insult pressed down on it. "Just imagine her in the jumpsuit," one voice snickered. "And the toy car, don't forget the oil stain. It'll be classic." Sienna's stomach twisted. The jokes weren't harmless. They were meant for her. She had thought Christmas was a sanctuary, a place to show love, but it had been a stage for her humiliation instead. The golden light spilling from the door crack glinted against the polished edges of the hallway tiles, outlining her hands and the fragile hope she had carried for weeks. Every syllable from inside the room made her fingers ache around the gift, every laugh like ice melting over her confidence. "And after that? We read the will," another voice added casually, like tossing a stone into a quiet pond. The words hit her harder than anything else. Dismissive, deliberate, final, her legs moved before she could think to stop them. Boots silent on tile, she slid backward along the hall, each step measured, careful not to announce her retreat. She didn't cry. Not yet. The warmth of the room, the laughter, the family she thought she knew, they were all unreachable behind that door. Sienna exhaled slowly, the hallway swallowing the sound of her breath. She let the gift drop lightly onto the side table, untouched but carrying the weight of betrayal. In that moment, the world tilted on its axis. The people who had promised love had chosen ridicule. She had always been invisible, easily overlooked, quietly tolerated. Tonight she realized she had to step out of that shadow. What happens when the people who raised you turn your dreams into their punchline? This is the story of the night I stopped being invisible, and became the landlord. The Reed house in Plano looked perfect, almost painfully so. Symmetrical picture frames lined the walls, polished hardwood floors reflected the overhead chandelier, and every cushion seemed fluffed by unseen hands. Sienna had spent years thinking this picture-perfect home was where she belonged, until the moment she realized she didn't. It was dinner, the air thick with the scent of roast and gravy, when she found the courage to speak her truth. At 18, with hands trembling and a napkin clutched like armor, she announced, "I'm going to study automotive engineering. I want to design cars, real cars, not just drive them." Her words barely left her lips when the serving spoon clattered onto the plate, smearing a streak of gravy across the pristine tablecloth. Silence fell, but it didn't last. Daniel's jaw dropped, shock painting his face, as if he had just been told she planned to move to Mars. Marlene's expression froze mid-buffering. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, clearly considering which job listings to show Sienna first. Aaron smirked knowingly, tilting his head as if he already understood how this would end badly. And Belle laughed, a sharp ringing sound, her phone lighting up with the ring-light glow she used to record every embarrassing moment, probably already planning her mockery online. Sienna stared at the spoon in her hands, noticing the smear of oil she had gotten earlier while helping with the cars in the garage. It wasn't much, just a trace of effort and passion, but to them it was another flaw, another reason to dismiss her. Marlene's voice finally broke the tension, smooth but cutting. "Maybe we should look at some business administration courses instead." "Engineering, well, girls don't always." She stopped, searching for a polite finish, but Sienna heard it all anyway. Aaron leaned back, concern dripping with condescension. "You sure you want to get your hands dirty like that? Could be risky. Might be better to, aim lower." And Belle, ever the performance queen, held up her phone laughing. Can you even imagine Sienna in a jumpsuit instead of heels? TikTok gold. Later, by the kitchen sink, Sienna scrubbed at her oil-stained hands while the echoes of their laughter followed her. She watched herself in the reflection of the faucet, tiny bubbles breaking the image, her palms smeared and raw. Every giggle, every smirk, every mocking glance told her she didn't belong, that her dreams were irrelevant, that her passion was a joke. For years, Sienna learned that quiet was safer than proud. But quiet has a cost, and she was about to stop paying it. Sienna set the gift down on the porch bench, its carefully wrapped box now feeling heavier than ever. The cold night air bit at her cheeks, and the faint hum of holiday lights from neighboring homes seemed almost mocking. Her hands still trembled from the hallway encounter, but she forced herself to straighten, to walk past the judgment and laughter that lingered behind the door. Sliding into her car, she started the engine, the dashboard lights painting her face in cold blues and greens. The plan had been simple: leave, breathe, reset. But as she drove through the quiet streets, the neon buzz of the 24/7 gas station ahead promised clarity in a way her living room never had. She pulled in, tires squealing softly, and stepped under the harsh glow, grabbing a soda from the cooler just to have something to do while her mind raced. She dialed Nora, her CPA and longtime ally, someone who saw the financial maps that ran behind her family's perfect facade. The phone rang once, twice. "Sienna, what's wrong? You sound..." Nora trailed off, sensing the tension in her voice. "I need to know everything about the showroom," Sienna said, her grip tightening around the oil-stained cloth she had slipped into her pocket earlier, a small, grounding reminder of who she really was. Her hands had touched real work, real effort. And that work had value. Minutes later, Nora began walking her through the files. Sienna pulled up the lease folder on her phone, scrolling through documents she had never seen before. Her pulse quickened with every line. And then she froze. "This can't be real," she whispered. Daniel Reed's flagship automotive showroom. It sat on her property. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally. Her father had signed the lease decades ago, before she was even born. And somehow, in the shuffle of family wealth and mismanagement, the title had transferred to her. Nora's voice held a quiet edge. 3 missed payments. Pending rent increase. And the non-renewal clause. They're technically on notice. Sienna's mind raced. Years of dismissal, years of jokes, belittling comments, and she had been powerless in their eyes. But this was power. Not through shouting, not through confrontation, but quietly, legally, irrefutably. She rolled the cloth between her fingers, the oil stain a tactile reminder of every sneer and every mocking laugh that had followed her since that dinner table years ago. And then came Nora's question, soft, deliberate. "What do you want to do?" Sienna leaned back in her seat, the neon glow flickering across her determined expression. She didn't need to answer immediately. She knew the moment she did, everything would change. Her family's empire, the very symbol of their pride, their control, was now in her hands, and she could finally rewrite the rules. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the truth, delivered at exactly the right moment. And Sienna had the perfect delivery date in mind. The truck's interior was cold, the faint hum of the engine filling the spaces between their focused silence. Sienna opened her laptop, the pale screen light casting sharp angles across her face, illuminating every line of determination. Nora slid in beside her, a stack of folders and a cup of coffee in hand, ready to guide her through the process with a precision only a CPA could wield. Each document was a tool, each line of text a weapon cloaked in legality. Sienna traced her finger over the notice of default, rereading the carefully worded non-renewal, the market rate increase spreadsheet that outlined every cent owed, and owed again. Payment logs sprawled across multiple sheets, showing months of negligence, and the ownership verification confirmed the truth she had already begun to feel in her bones. The power had shifted. Nora's voice broke the concentrated quiet. "If they planned a Christmas lesson for you, this is your gift in return." Sienna's eyes didn't leave the screen. "It's not a gift," she corrected softly, voice precise. "It's a line. Line drawn. Barrier set. Justice measured, not emotional." She reviewed the courier instructions, triple-checking every attachment. The documents had to be exact, untouchable, and indisputable. One misstep, and the weight of this moment would crumble into chaos, but Sienna had no doubt. Every detail was accounted for, every clause unassailable. Finally she pressed send. The courier confirmation pinged instantly, a quiet but victorious note that resonated more than any cheer or insult ever could. The papers were in motion, legally binding, a signal that her family's jokes, their ridicule, their carefully rehearsed humiliation, were about to meet something real. Sienna leaned back, the pale glow of the laptop reflecting in her eyes. For years she had been silent, accommodating, enduring the sneers, the smirks, the whispered conversations behind closed doors. But sitting here, watching the digital confirmation flash on the screen, she realized she wouldn't fix what they had broken. Not their pride, not their perception, not their habit of underestimating her. Nora sipped her coffee, smiling faintly. Clean. By the book. Powerful. Sienna nodded. This wasn't spectacle. There were no raised voices, no dramatic confrontations. Just the quiet, unassailable power of the truth laid bare in legal form, and the knowledge that when the storm hit, they would have nowhere to hide. While they had spent years rehearsing jokes, mocking every small ambition she had dared to speak aloud, Sienna had spent this night drafting their reckoning. Legal. Clean. Irreversible. The weight of every laugh, every smear, every invisible slight was now transformed into something tangible. Something they could not ignore, and could never erase. She rested her hands on the laptop, feeling the hum of authority through the keyboard, the vibration of potential finally aligning with her own. Tonight the lesson would be delivered. And she would do it on her terms. The church smelled of pine and candle wax, the soft glow of string lights bouncing off crimson poinsettias lined along the altar. Families murmured among themselves, cameras capturing every smile, every flicker of excitement from the children in the choir. Sienna stayed in the back pew, hands folded, calm and deliberate, the weight of the past weeks pressing behind her eyes. Marlene moved like a conductor, orchestrating her atmosphere of generosity, directing volunteers, nodding at the ushers, her smile polished and practiced. The Reed family, dressed in coordinated jewel tones, projected the perfect image of holiday warmth. No one suspected the storm about to arrive at 6:47 p.m. The courier slipped through the back door, a nondescript envelope in hand, carefully avoiding the children lined up in the choir. He reached the Reed's pew just as Marlene bent over to adjust a tiny angel's halo. "Excuse me," he said softly, extending the envelope. Marlene accepted it with a polite nod, still smiling, unaware of the reality contained within. As she unfolded the first page, the smile faltered. Then the polished facade cracked completely. Her hand trembled, lips parting as the words sank in. Notice of default, pending rent increase, non-renewal clause. All referencing the very building they had assumed to own, the stage of their carefully rehearsed Christmas program. Daniel's head jerked up. "What is that?" he muttered, eyes wide, voice tight. He grabbed the envelope, scanning the documents, jaw clenching with disbelief. Aaron leaned over, lips pressed into a hard line, reading every sentence as though the paper itself was a trap. Belle froze mid-laugh, her phone forgotten on her lap. Eyes wide in shock, whispers rippled through the pews. Is that legal? Who delivered it? Did she just... The pastor paused mid-instruction, eyebrows lifting, scanning the congregation, sensing the sudden tension. Candles flickered in the gentle breeze of the open doors, unnoticed, as the Reed's carefully curated image began to crumble in real time. Marlene's face went pale, then red, then a mix of anger and panic. She stammered, words failing to form coherent sentences. The children shifted nervously, picking up on the adult's unease. Daniel, fumbling for his phone, tried to call Sienna at 7:02 p.m. Each ring went unanswered. He lowered it slowly, comprehension dawning, eyes darting between the papers and his family. The room felt smaller, the light harsher, every polished surface reflecting the humiliation back at them. Sienna stayed seated, quiet, her heart steady. She didn't need to rise, didn't need to explain. The documents spoke louder than any words ever could. The mockery they had planned, the Christmas skit meant to humiliate her, had backfired spectacularly. She glanced down at the oil-stained cloth in her coat pocket, a tactile reminder of every effort they had mocked, every dream they had dismissed. And now, that same effort had cemented her authority, delivered in a way they couldn't argue with, couldn't twist, and couldn't ignore. They had wanted her to be the punchline, the source of laughter for the holiday. Instead, Sienna had become the plot twist. Quiet, deliberate, and irreversible, whispers continued to ripple through the pews. Sienna allowed herself a small, private smile. The balance had shifted. The Reeds were no longer untouchable, and the woman they thought they had humiliated had quietly seized the power they never saw coming. They wanted to make her the joke of their Christmas program. Instead, she became the plot twist they never saw coming. Sienna stood on the porch of the Colorado cabin, snow drifting lazily around her boots, settling on the railings like a quiet audience. The world was muted white, the kind of silence that made every sound, every heartbeat, feel amplified. Inside, Nora hummed softly, chopping vegetables on the kitchen counter, the rhythmic sound grounding Sienna as the cold nipped at her cheeks. The phone vibrated in her pocket. She didn't check the screen immediately, letting the snowfall and the hush of the mountains buffer her. Finally she answered. "Marlene." The voice on the other end was ragged, thin, frantic. "Where are you? What have you done?" Sienna's lips curved into a calm, deliberate smile. She could almost picture Marlene pacing, fingers tangled in her hair, the room behind her cluttered with panic. Chairs scraping, whispered questions from relatives, a faint sob or two echoing from someone overwhelmed by the unraveling spectacle of the Christmas program. "I'm outside," Sienna said lightly, letting the snow drift around her like a shield. "Did you enjoy my gift?" The silence that followed was long, heavy, almost reverent. She could imagine the sudden halt in Marlene's breath, the way the words clung to the line like icicles. You can't," Marlene stammered finally, disbelief threading her voice. Sienna's tone remained measured, deliberate. "All communication can go through the LLC inbox from now on." Marlene's panic rising in the background. "You can't do that." "I already did," Sienna interrupted softly but firmly, the words sharp enough to sever a decade of control and expectation. The line went quiet again, Sienna listening to the faintest echo of shuffling papers, murmured protests, and the distant scrape of a chair. She glanced down at the snow settling on the porch boards, each flake a small punctuation, marking the boundary she had drawn. No guilt, no hesitation. Only the clarity of finally standing on her own terms. Nora peeked through the window, glancing at her with a raised eyebrow and a faint smile, then returned to her chopping, unbothered. Sienna tucked the phone into her coat, the icy wind brushing her face, and exhaled, feeling the tension ease. The Reeds were used to orbiting her life, shaping it, dismissing it, mocking it. Tonight, none of that mattered. For the first time in her life, Sienna wasn't orbiting their expectations. She was standing on her own ground, and they couldn't pull her back. Snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, blanketing the Colorado landscape in silence. Sienna's boots pressed into the powder, leaving clear, deliberate tracks, evidence that she was present, resolute, and untouchable. The world around her was quiet, but inside, a sense of calm power settled like a warm weight in her chest. This was her line, her boundary, her moment. And for the first time it felt like victory. The cabin was silent. No stage decorations, no polished lighting, no carefully curated appearances, just the natural rhythm of morning in the Colorado mountains. Sienna stepped onto the porch with a steaming mug of coffee, the first footprints in the fresh snow marking her presence like a quiet claim. The world felt untouched, waiting, as if holding its breath for what came next. Inside, Nora moved methodically, humming softly while tending to breakfast, chopping vegetables with a calm precision that mirrored the stillness outside. There was no urgency, no performance, just the simple, steady flow of life continuing, undisturbed. Sienna checked her email once, almost absent-mindedly. There it was. Daniel's logistics message, professional and measured, devoid of anger or entitlement, recognizing her as the landlord she had become overnight. No drama, no pleading, just acknowledgement. She drafted a brief, equally professional reply, her fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment longer than necessary. Savoring the ease of authority finally recognized, she stepped outside again, sweeping snow from the porch, feeling the crisp morning air in her lungs. Each small movement, stacking firewood, fixing a hinge on the door, brushing the powdery frost off the railing, felt grounded, tangible, and fully hers. Even the oil-stained thumbnail, catching sunlight as she lifted the mug, no longer carried shame or ridicule. It was a badge of effort, of resilience, of the work they had mocked for so long. The quiet stretched around her like a soft blanket, a space to finally breathe, to reflect without interruption or judgment. No one to orchestrate her emotions, no one to laugh at her choices, no one to dictate the measure of her worth. Boundaries, she realized, were not punishment. They were the shape of her refusal to carry what was never hers to bear. The expectations, the belittlement, the silent dismissal. Each careful, deliberate step outside, each measured email inside was a statement. She existed on her own terms in her own space, and with her own power intact. Sienna sipped her coffee, letting the sun glint off the snow, off the mountains, off the small oil stain that had once been a punchline. Today, it was a reminder that she had survived, claimed her space, and found the quiet freedom of autonomy. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're the quiet shape of what you refuse to carry anymore. Sienna watched as the morning sun glinted off the fresh snow, slowly erasing the footprints she had made the night before. Each fading mark reminded her that distance wasn't absence. It was respect, a boundary that preserved clarity and peace. The world outside the cabin was quiet, impartial, and patient, just like the life she had worked so hard to build. She traced her gaze to the horizon, thinking of the empire she had quietly assembled. Real business, real assets, real life, something tangible and enduring. Every lease signed, every spreadsheet verified, every calculated move had been hers. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't performative, but it was solid. She had built something real while they built appearances, polished facades that could crumble at the slightest pressure. The choice to stay away from the Reeds wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. It was the acknowledgement that some relationships, no matter how familiar or expected, weren't worth sacrificing her peace. No yelling, no drama, no loud confrontations. Just a deliberate step back and a refusal to absorb the consequences of their careless decisions. Her oil-stained hands, once a punchline at holiday dinners, now rested on the railing, strong and capable. They had touched the reality of her work, the grit of her ambition, and had literally built the foundation for her power. The same hands that had been mocked and underestimated were now the ones that had shifted the balance, quietly but irrevocably. There was no regret, no anger. Only clarity. Only the satisfaction of understanding that she didn't need to prove herself to anyone who had chosen to dismiss her. The past didn't define her. Her choices did. And for the first time, she felt the calm, unshakable certainty that comes from living life on your own terms. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. And sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. Not all family is safe. Not all relatives honor your ambitions, your effort, or your boundaries. Sometimes the people who raised you can also be the ones who diminish you, whether intentionally or unconsciously. And that's okay to recognize. You don't owe anyone access to your life if it comes at the cost of your dignity. You don't have to participate in their performances, their jokes, or their carefully curated image. There is power in building quietly, in constructing something real while others are busy performing. Legal boundaries, contracts, clear expectations, they are more than paperwork. They are shields, tools of protection that speak louder than any emotional confrontation. They allow you to assert your worth without losing your calm, without stooping to their level. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It isn't a punishment to anyone else. It's survival. It's the conscious decision to preserve your energy, your integrity, and your dreams. Success, built in silence, is the clearest, most irrefutable response to years of dismissal, ridicule, and undervaluation. Your dreams aren't a punchline. Your work isn't a joke. And you don't have to wait for permission to respect yourself. Sometimes the quietest choices carry the loudest power, and they last far longer than any joke ever could. If stories like this stay with you, if they echo something you've lived or something you're still trying to leave behind, stay close to this channel. Many of you know the sting of family dismissal, the quiet weight of unspoken expectations, and the pain of being underestimated by those who should have seen you first. Your experiences matter. Your choices matter. Breaking silence isn't easy, but it's necessary. Sharing your story can be the first step in reclaiming your own narrative. Drop a comment if this resonated with you. You're not alone and your journey is valid. Subscribe for more stories like this, where we uncover truth, resilience, and the quiet power of standing on your own terms. Remember, the best revenge isn't loud. It's living well, unapologetically, and on your own terms. Your story, your rules, your life.